Okay, so I haven't gone mono yet. I'm still shooting one shot color, but my friend Doug over at Astro AF has been kind enough to provide me with his mono data so I can bring this video to you guys. Like I said, I'm still shooting in colors. Someday I'm hoping to get to mono, but it's probably a ways down the road. So I want to say thanks to Doug for providing me with that data. If you guys can, it'd really help him out. If you go over and check out his channel, he's got a lot of good content going on there. Give him a subscribe while you're over there visiting. Leave him a comment, let him know that I sent you over. So this video is just going to be in RGB. We're not going to be doing any luminance. We're not going to be doing any SHO or anything like that. I wanted to start with a pretty basic mono processing tutorial using a couple of scripts that Siril provides with the software when you install it. But down the road, I hope to do more mono processing videos that will include the luminance channel and get into SHO and HOO just as I learn the techniques and stuff. Right now, I'm just playing with the data that Doug gave me just to get familiar with everything. It helps me, so I figured as I'm learning it, I'd try to help you guys if you're interested in doing this as well. So let's get to it. My name is Rich, and you're watching Deep Space Astro. Okay, I want to start with showing you guys how I have my data organized within File Explorer. We're going to be using Siril's inbuilt script for mono pre-processing to create our stacks. So we're going to be running through that 3 times, once for the blue channel, once for the green channel, once for the red channel. And just like all of Siril's scripts, you need to have a folder named biases, darks, flats, and lights. And within each folder, you need to have the appropriate files. So like I said, we're going to be running the script 3 times, 1 for each channel. So each of my channels have my 4 folders with the proper files inside of each of them. And then I also created an extra one called working. We're going to be changing our working directory within Siril a few times as we go through this process, mostly because we have to, but also because it just helps keep things clean if you have a separate working directory. It's a way for me to keep track of where I'm at during this workflow. The data itself, each channel was shot on a separate night along with new flats. The biases and darks were shot on night 1, and they are being used for the other 2 channels as well. So darks and biases obviously can be reused. Flats you always want to take when anything in your optical train changes, or if you've torn down your rig and set it back up. Since Doug was shooting this in mono, that meant that he was changing filters. So that's another reason to shoot your flats, is in between filter changes. So we have individual flats for every channel, but just know that the darks and biases were only shot on night 1, and we've used those across the 3 channels for the processing. So we'll jump over into Siril. As you can see right now, the latest version as of time of recording is 1.2.4. I'm going to come over to the home button to set my working directory. M16 is where those channel folders are at that I just showed you, and we'll start with the red. So I'm just going to double click on the red and then click open, and then come over to scripts and click on mono pre-processing. That'll take a few minutes to complete, so I'm going to pause the video and come right back. Okay, stacking has completed, so we're going to come over to our open button, and we're going to open up our result_red file, come out of linear, and we'll just jump into auto stretch real quick just so we can take a look at it. And the next thing we want to do is give this a crop just to get rid of the stacking artifacts that you can see around the edges here. Again, I've mentioned this before in other videos, I prefer to jump into a histogram view. It tends to really emphasize those stacking artifacts so they're easier to see. So we'll just draw a selection around there and make sure we are cropping out our stacking artifacts. Right click and crop, and then come over and hit our save button to save that crop to the image that we just opened up. I'm going to come back into auto stretch just to tame the view down, and we're going to do the same thing for the green and the blue channel as well. So first thing we need to do is change our working directory again. We're in red and we want to be in green, so we're going to select green, click open, and then once again run the mono pre-processing script. Okay, the green channel has completed now, so we're going to open up the green stack and do the same thing that we did previously and drop into the histogram view and crop out our stacking artifacts. Once again, right click and crop, and then make sure you hit save. One more to go, so that is our blue channel. So we're going to change our working directory over to blue, click open, and once again, run the mono pre-processing script. And now our blue channel is complete. So just like before, we're going to open up the blue stack, go into histogram, draw a selection to get our cropping artifacts out. This one down just a little bit, and right click and crop. Once again, save and auto stretch, just so it's easier on our eyes. So that's as far as we're going to go with Siril for the moment. We're going to jump into Grexpert now, and we're going to give each of these stacks, red, green, and blue, we're going to do a background extraction on them as well as some denoising. So click load image. I'm in my red folder, so we'll start with the red. I have a 15% auto stretch applied at the moment, and we're going to come into background extraction. Because I ran through this a few times figuring out my workflow, My smoothing is set to 0.2. I can show you guys real quick. If I'm up too high, say like on 0.8 and hit calculate background, you can see the brightness along the edge here, and the image looks relatively flat now. You know, we can check the background that is removed. You could see that it got a good chunk of it, but I can still see some faint glowing coming down this edge. So I found if I back this down to 0.2 and say calculate background, if you keep an eye on this edge here, you'll see when it readjusts, it got darker. So it did a better job, in my opinion, of balancing out the background. So ran that at 0.2. Denoise, same thing. I tend to zoom in and out and take a look to see how it's denoising. For this particular one, 0.9 was working well for me. So like I said, your data's, your data will be different. So zoom in, you can see the noise that's in there. Once it denoises, take a closer look at it, make sure you're happy with the results. Click the denoise image, and this will take a few minutes. So we'll be right back. All right, so now that we've background extracted the image and denoised it, we're going to save it. So click on save, make sure you're on 32-bit fits, save processed. And we're going to walk up to that working directory that we created at the beginning of the video. And we're going to save the file in here. But we're going to rename it. Again, this is the red stack, so we're just going to name it R. And we're doing this only because the script that we're going to be using to make our color image requires the files to be named R, G, and B. So just take care of the step now. If you forget to do it here, it's not a big deal. You can always do it in File Explorer later, that's fine. But just to save a couple clicks, I do it as I'm saving it out of GrexPert. So again, that was the red channel. So now we're going to open up the green channel. So back over to our green folder, open up our green stack, and rinse and repeat the same thing that we did with the red channel. Do a background extraction at 0.2 and then our denoising. All right, and with the green image done, we'll save that one, just like always, into our working directory, and we'll name that one green. And then the entire process once again with the blue channel. So back up into our blue, open up our blue stack, run our background extraction, and then our denoising. All right, and with the blue channel done, we'll do the same thing, save it off to our working directory and rename that one blue. So we're done with GrexPert, so we'll go ahead and close that. Back into Siril, we're going to change our home directory once more. This time we're going to change it to our working directory where we just saved our 3 files out of GrexPert. So double click working and hit open. Okay, so we're going to do some deconvolution first, and we're going to start with our red channel. So click open up our red channel, and then we're going to come over to image processing, star processing, and hit the gear icon here to open up our dynamic PSF dialog. We're going to set our amplitude range to be between 0.1 and 0.7. And we're also going to change the profile type from Gaussian to Moffat, and then click your Detect Stars button. Once it's complete, it'll show you how many stars that it detected within that amplitude range. For this image, it found 84, and the ones with the orange circles around them are the 84 stars that it's referencing. Now we have our stars selected in the range that we want. We're going to go to Image Processing and Deconvolution. We're going to tick PSF from stars, which is telling Deconvolution to create this PSF preview, and this is from a previous run that I had. You guys, the first time that you run this after you've opened Siril, there won't be anything over here, so just disregard seeing this for right now. But you want to select PSF from stars, which is telling Deconvolution to create this PSF preview from the 84 stars that it detected over here in the dynamic PSF. So click Generate PSF. Make sure your star is within the boundaries of this box. If it's not, and I'll show you guys, if we bump it down to, I believe 19 is the default, and if I was to hit Generate PSF, you could see the edges of the stars are actually touching the edges of the box in the preview. So that's not what you want. You want to make sure the star is completely within that box. So I'm going to bump that up to 25, hit PSF from stars again, and then generate. And that's what we're looking for. The star is completely within that preview box. I've gone through this already, so I know what my settings are. I'm just going to do a little bit of deconvolution, because you have to keep in mind deconvolution will also emphasize any noise that is in the image. That's part of the reason why I ran a denoise function previous to doing the deconvolution, is to get the image as noise free as possible before this step. Otherwise, I'm just going to be amplifying it. So be careful with it. Watch what you're doing. Your settings are going to be different. Just go back and forth and play with your settings. So like I said, this is where I landed. This is a very mild deconvolution. So I'm just going to hit apply now that we have our preview and our settings in place, and that'll take a few minutes. So I'm going to pause the video once again, and we'll come back when it's done. Okay, deconvolution has completed. So now it's just rinse and repeat with the green and the blue channel. So we'll close our deconvolution window. I'm going to click on the remove all stars button here to clear our selection of stars, and then click close. So we'll go to green next, go back into star processing. Our amplitude range is still set from our previous image. So we're just going to click detect stars. And this one, it found 132 within that range. So we're going to come back up in the deconvolution and you'll see that your previous PSF preview is still maintained, but we don't want to use that, right? Because that was from the other image. So we're going to go through the same process we did previously and say PSF from stars, generate PSF. We're within our bounding box, so that's good. Again, I'm going to crank that down just a little bit and hit apply. Okay, green channel is done. So we're going to close and clear our selections, hit the save button, and then we're going to jump over to our blue channel, do the same thing. So over to star processing, get our dynamic PSF opened up. Again, amplitude range was maintained. So we're just going to click detect stars, 81 of them, and then we'll come into deconvolution once again, PSF from stars, generate PSF. I'm going to bump that up just a little bit. That looks good, and click apply. All right, so blue's done. So again, close everything, clear our selection, and now we're ready to create our RGB composite from these 3 images. So like I mentioned before, we're going to use one of Siril's provided scripts to combine the RGB channels into a color image. That is why in our working directory, when we came out of Graxpert, we renamed everything RGB. It's pretty much a prerequisite for the script to work. It can be different naming conventions, but you need to make sure that they're named alphabetically so the script can identify them. It's just easier just to name them RGB. So that's why I left it that way. So again, we're still in our working directory, as you can see up top here, which is where the RGB files exist. So now we're just going to come over to our scripts menu and we're going to run our RGB composition script. It'll be pretty quick. This takes a minute or two. That script actually uses a 2-pass registration. Since we crop each and every one of these individual images, it will align them for us. So once it's done, for me, 33 seconds. Your time will vary, obviously. Now the color image has been created for us. So we're going to come over to open and look for our rgb.fit file. Double click it to open it up. We're in an auto stretch view and there's our color image. So at this point, the processing is no different than an image that came out of a one-shot color camera. I'm going to go through it here for you guys, but just letting you know, we're past the mono part now. We needed to get to the RGB image and now we do the processing the way that we want to do the processing to our liking, right? So I can see just a little bit of lightness around the edges here still. So I'm going to give this just another quick crop just to clean that stuff up. Nothing too crazy. And then we're going to come over into image processing and do some color calibration with the photometric color calibration tool. Just like always, since this was shot with an astronomy camera, all the information about the object that was imaged and the focal length of the scope and the pixel size of the camera are all stored within the image. So there's nothing we need to do here. And I'm going to click OK. All right, plate solving failed. This happens once in a while. See if we get lucky. Usually if you tick down sample image, and then try it again, that'll get it past it. I've seen sometimes if you draw a selection around the center of the image and run it, it'll just look at that selection box. But in this case here, it did in fact work by downsampling the image. So we are now color corrected. Click the close box and we can see we have some green tint in the background here. So I am going to go to image processing and remove green noise, hit apply, see what that does for us. All right, so that looks a lot better. The next step, again, optional, just like always, but I prefer to remove the stars from the image and then process the image itself and then add the stars back in. So that's what we're going to do now. Come up to image processing, star processing, and StarNet star removal. We are still linear, so we have not done any stretching yet. We need to tick pre-stretch linear image and make sure generate star mask is in fact selected. Click execute and give it a few minutes. So there is our image without the stars. It looks a little overdone with the current auto stretch. That happens because of the denoising function within Graxpert. It tends to make the auto stretch in Siril a little bit more aggressive, but it's fine. This is just a view. We haven't stretched the data yet. So the data is fine. It's all intact. Nothing to worry about. We're going to start stretching now. So we're going to come down and we're going to come out of our auto stretch view and go into linear. This will go to black as soon as I open up our stretching algorithm that we're going to use, which is image processing and generalized hyperbolic stretch transformation. So you'll see the screen goes black there. All the data is there. We need to pull it out, right? Just like always. So I'm going to start with my local stretch intensity pretty high and be aggressive with my stretch so I can see all of the data that's within the image and determine where I want to stop that initial stretch from. So this is too bright. What I usually do, and I've mentioned this in other videos, right now when I'm stretching, I'll look for the faint dust, gas, nebulosity that's in the image and stretch beyond that. And when I stop seeing any more data coming out and the screen is just getting brighter, then I know I've gone too far. So I'll start backing it down, watching the faint areas that I'm interested in. And as soon as those faint areas themselves start to disappear, then I know that I've gone too far in the other direction, and I will just bump it up towards the right again. Doesn't have to be precise. It just seems what works well for me. So I'll call that good for our initial stretch. I'm going to hit apply, set my local stretch intensity for the next stretch about 2/3 of the way over, and just ever so slightly bring this over. Sometimes it's even better to use the plus and minus buttons because it is so sensitive at this stretch intensity. But you know, get it to where it looks good to you. Don't want to go too much. Hit apply, and then my third stretch, I'm going to leave the intensity right at the default setting, about 1/3 of the way over, and just do little iterative stretches and hitting apply in between. You can do more of a stretch if you want. I just find there's better control if you do it a little bit at a time. If you go too much, and it's hard to take it away. So just take little baby steps with it. And then let's see, I think that looks good. You can see in the histogram here with the stretching we did, our black point moved over considerably. So come over to your type of stretch and drop into your linear stretch, and you can adjust the black point. You don't have to take the data all the way over to the left-hand side. Just watch your background and get it to where you like it. But if you do start approaching this left edge here, know that if the histogram starts sliding off the left edge, you're clipping data, and it shows that to you right here. So you want to make sure you're not clipping data, because at that point you're losing the data. So adjust the black point to your liking while you're watching your clip percentage, while you're watching your background. Find that balance to where you like it to be, and I think that's good. 0.001% is not going to make a difference. Just try to keep it as close to 0 as you can. So I'm going to leave it there and hit apply, and then I'm going to come back over into my generalized hyperbolic transform, and this time I'm going to draw a selection around some of the fainter nebulosity up here in the left hand corner, and set that as my symmetry point by simply clicking the little eyedropper tool. You'll see the symmetry point moved over, and with the local stretch intensity again at its default position, I'm just going to stretch it a little bit at a time. I'm watching the image more than anything else. Click apply and move it a little bit more. That's a little bit too much. I like to go again a little bit at a time with these stretches. Make sure you hit your eyedropper. I don't think I did on that last pass. Because every time you hit apply, it's going to reset it. So make sure you hit your eyedropper again if you're going to go at the same symmetry point. Apply, eyedropper, and maybe we'll give it just one little more bump, and then hit apply. And then for this next stretch, I do the same thing with a selection point, but this time I like to find the brightest area that I can within the image, which looks to be right about in here, and then hit my eyedropper. And you can see the symmetry point came over quite significantly from the last time that we did this. And what it allows it to do is actually, if you watch the histogram as well as the image as I'm doing this stretch, it narrows out the histogram, giving a little bit more contrast, darkening the image just slightly without actually moving your black point. So I'll show you what I'm talking about here. If I move this over to the left, you can see here's our symmetry point. See how dark the image got. That's way too much, right? We just want to, again, little steps, watching the image, clicking apply when we get a result, and then I'm going to hit my eyedropper again to set the symmetry point to the same spot, and just rinse and repeat again. Like I've said before, this is a preference thing, so there's no right or wrong way. The only thing that would be wrong is, again, watching your histogram, that you're not clipping any of this data, because at that point you're losing data. So just keep playing with it until you've got the image look as good as it can be, and I think I'm there. I'm going to call that done. Actually, let's do one more. I'm gonna hit my eyedropper again and just talk about the shadow and highlight protection points down here. In their current positions, your stretch is affecting the background as well, and the highlights, right? So if you want to, as I'm stretching, if you notice, if I go kind of aggressive, the background got really dark, but if I move my shadow protection point over, and I can only go as high as my symmetry point, you can see it's protected the background. So, you know, use that to your advantage as well as you're trying to add some contrast and darkness into the nebulosity itself. You may not want the same thing to happen to the actual background. So I'm going to move this down just a little bit, and, you know, again, just play with the shadow protection. I think that looks good there. And then the highlight protection, it's all the way over now. If I slide it to the left as far as my symmetry point, you can see the effect it has on the image for the highlights. So play around with them. They can get you some pretty cool results sometimes. Helps you balance out the background as well as the image. So we're going to leave that there. I'm going to hit apply and then close. Click on the screen to get my selection point taken away. And now we're ready to save this off as a TIFF file and move it into Photoshop. So we're going to click the save button over here. Under supported files, I'm going to select TIFF. You can also just type the extension if you want to. Starless_RGB is the name of the fit file that we have open. So it just carried it over for the TIFF. I'm fine with that. Going to click save, and then 16-bit unsigned integer. Save button. Now we'll come over into File Explorer in our working directory, locate our TIFF file, and double click it to bring it into Photoshop. First thing I'm going to do is just check my levels real quick. So I'm going to come up into Image, Adjustments, and Levels. I like to do it per channel because they can sometimes be off. So I'll check the red, and what I'm looking for is any space between the left side of this histogram and the histogram itself where the data starts. So the red channel looks good, green channel looks good, and the blue channel looks good. So I'm not going to do anything here. Like I said, if this, sometimes you'll see a blank space between the left-hand side and where the data starts. If that was the case, then I would just drag over my slider to bring the channel better in line with the other channels. And we're just going to go up into filter now and camera raw filter. We're going to start over here in our light section and begin with just adding a little bit of contrast to the image. And then we're going to play with the sliders below contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. Lately, I've been starting with my whites just to bring them up a little bit, and then jumping back over to my highlights and sliding those up. Just, back and forth between the two. You don't want to get too aggressive because obviously you start blowing things out, right? So I start with the whites, go to the highlights, and then kind of back and forth, watching the image to get what I think looks like a good result. And then I'll move into the shadows and the blacks. So generally the shadows and the blacks I take down pretty low, just the way I like the image to look. So that was the shadows, and then the blacks, we're just going to bump down just a little bit. I don't want the background to get too dark. I think that looks good. And then we can come into the color. If you want, you can bump up the vibrance. Again, you don't want, I prefer not to go too high. That's too oversaturated for me. I actually like the way it looks right now. Maybe we'll just take it up a couple ticks. And then into the effects, dehaze, just a little bit over to the right, just to clean up the image a little. And then a little bit of clarity, just to provide a little bit of sharpening, if you will, all the structures that we see within here. This is really good data that Doug has taken. And then same thing, color mixer. We adjusted the vibrance up top. You can play with your saturation and your hue if you want. I'm happy with the way this looks right now. I don't want to adjust any of the saturation or hue in this image, but I do find playing with the luminance gives some pretty cool results as well. So we're going to come over here to our targeted adjustment tool and click on that. And I'm just going to pick some areas in the image where I want to see what I can do with the luminance. So I'm going to left mouse button on this spot. I'm holding my mouse button down and sliding back and forth to see what kind of results that I get. And you can see over on the right hand side that my purples and my magentas are being adjusted as I move back and forth. The rest of the colors are being left alone because the point that I selected just contains purples and magentas. So just going to bump that up maybe a little bit, and then we'll come over here into the reddish pink areas and do the same kind of thing. I like bumping up the brightness just in specific areas. I think it gives it a nice look. Again, preference thing here. We'll do the same thing over on this side, and I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to call that done. We're going to click OK. We're going to come over and save the TIFF file. So file and just hit save, and then back over to Siril, and we need to first open that TIFF file and save it back as a 32-bit fit. That's our TIFF image opened up. We're going to click the Save As button, specify a fit file. This time I am going to change the name since we're so close to being done, and I'm just going to call it M16. Hit save. We'll take it into 32-bit. Save again. Now we're ready to add the stars back. So we're going to come up to image processing and star processing, star recomposition. Move this over to the side so we can see what we're doing. On the left hand side, we're going to click up here in this box where it says none, and we're going to select our M16 file that we just saved, let that load, and then over on the right hand side under star stretch, we're going to click that box that says none, and we're going to open up our star mask that was created when we removed the stars. I always come down and hit my advanced button to make sure my color stretch model is in either human or even weighted. That tends to give you better star colors, but there's nothing wrong with using independent as well. Settings that you can play with. Modified arc sign stretch tends to work the best. Sometimes I do run it in generalized hyperbolic transform though. Again, play with it, see what you like, and then just start stretching. This is the point where you can bring the stars in as much or as little as you want. If we went all the way to the right, put your sunglasses on because things are about to get bright. So I tend to not bring the stars in fully because I like the center of attention to be whatever the DSO is. So we'll just go back and forth here a little bit until I decide that I like what I see, and maybe we'll go down just a little bit, and I like that. So when you get to the point you like how your stars are looking, just hit your apply button and then click close. Last final step I like to do before I call it finished is come up to image processing and use the contrast limited adaptive histogram equalization. It's a mouthful, I know, but this tends to give some really nice contrast to the image. As soon as you run it, the default settings are applied. There's a preview button here, so if I unselect that, there's our before and there's our after. You can change your tiles grid size as well as play with your clip limit. Usually I just play with the grid size and just watching the image as I'm applying additional grids, see what looks best to me. And I think this one, and you can spend a lot of time in here doing this. I think 9 looks good. So I am going to, well, we'll show you here. We'll uncheck the preview again. There's before and there's after. I mean, I think that's really helping pulling out this faint nebulosity around the edges. I really like that. So I'm going to call 9 good for this particular image and hit apply. At this point, the image is complete. So I usually save the final image as a TIFF and just name it M16 final, so I know which one I'm looking for. And then I'll open that up in the Photoshop and do my export into a JPEG format to post on any of my social media sites. So that's the basic model processing tutorial within Siril. I hope you guys found it useful. I know I had a lot of fun figuring things out and putting together a good workflow. If you have any tips or tricks, let me know in the comments below. As always, I want to say thanks to all my members, both here on YouTube and on buymeacoffee.com. If you want to become a member and see your name scrolling over the screen in future videos, then join one of my membership programs and we'll make that happen. Appreciate everybody's time. See you in the next video, and clear skies.